In that initial conversation with the angels, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates the function of humanity on earth. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi Khalifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates three things about the legacy of humanity in this sentence. He says, I am preparing for earth a Khalifa. Three things. I am preparing for the earth a Khalifa. So from the very start, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before He even created humanity, indicates that humanity will end up on earth, despite Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala putting Adam alayhi salam in paradise in his early days or early years, however long it was. And there's a very important wisdom there that we'll get to in a future episode. But what I want to focus on is the following. What is a Khalifa? Well, there are two definitions here, two possible definitions. Khalifa, from khalafa, yakhluf, is for something to succeed something else. So it's referring to humanity as a species that procreates, that has descendants. And one generation essentially succeeds the previous generation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that an important part of the human experience is the having of children. And I think this is pretty obvious. But in light of our world today, where individualism has come in a way where it views the having of children as an impairment, as a hindrance, as a nuisance to one's ability to live life. Well, here we see that the Western idea of a lifestyle in comparison to the Quranic narrative of a lifestyle clashes. There's tension there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying it is part and parcel of being a human being to have children, to see your children grow, to see your grandchildren, maybe even your great-grandchildren. But in the Western world, people delay and keep postponing reproduction, having children, until when and for what reason? You find that the main objectives of in our experience here in the West is, I got to make sure my career is on path. I got to make sure that financially I am extremely stable, which sometimes means buying a home, owning a home, getting through a good chunk of that mortgage. Maybe they'll get married, but they won't have children until much later on. Making sure that they get all their education done, making sure that they go to all of the vacations that they want to go to. Well, why? Because, anyone who has children knows that it becomes a lot more difficult to do these things when you have children. This is a reality. Nobody can really debate that. But the idea is, individualism, as per the Western definition of this term, has clashed with a fundamental function of the human being on this earth. Now, I'm not suggesting that humans should be having, or people should be having 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 children as our grandparents would have and our great-grandparents would have. But just the notion of the role and the place of children in the Western world, a nuisance, a hindrance, a problem, something to delay. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, in order to feel human, you need to have children, regardless of how many. But the procreation, the reproduction, the offspring, raising a generation is a huge function of what it means to be on this earth. So let us really begin to reshape how we view ourselves and not falling into the trap of this economic outlook of having children. I'm sure we've heard some people say, yeah, it's not a good investment right now for me to have children. Yeah, it's not a good financial decision for me to have children. Oh, come on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the provisions of children, نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُهُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ. We are the ones who are going to provide your children, and we're going to provide you so that you provide your children as well. So one way of understanding our place here in the world as khulafa of Allah on this earth is that we are meant to raise different generations. And so somebody whose role is to raise the next generation, that is of the most honorable roles. In fact, isn't that the role of the prophets? When you look at Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, what did he leave behind? What? He left behind the best legacy, and he was the best human being to walk this earth. What did he leave behind? Did he leave behind estates? Did he leave behind a huge trust? Did he leave behind a kingdom? Did he leave behind wealth? No. He had pennies. He had pennies in his account when he passed away. But what did he leave behind? He left behind a generation of individuals who changed the world. That is success right there. That is the epitome of the human experience. So for the mothers out there, don't buy into the Western definition of what it means to be a female. As a female, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you to be the initial and the most important element of fulfilling this function of khulafa on this earth, of being the successors on this earth. For mothers and fathers, don't let your careers and your pursuit for financial stability and financial well-being cause you to constantly say no to time with children. Because when you say yes to a new project, it's not a question of halal and haram at this point. It's a question of what are you saying no to? If you're constantly taking projects and working, and it comes at the expense of spending time with your children, and now that's going to reduce your ability or limit your ability to raise a generation, now we're distancing ourselves from what it means to be a Khalifa. So always remember, dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, pointing out in this verse, in this sentence, that among the most honorable things about being a human being is raising a second generation. The other meaning of Khalifa is more of a technical one. Like we say, the khulafa of the Muslim political governance, those who are tasked with a responsibility to carry out the affairs of a group of people or beyond that. A Khalifa is somebody who is tasked with the responsibilities to ensure that things are working and functioning properly. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He is creating for this world a Khalifa under this definition, then what it means is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to entrust humanity with something, with His commands, so that humanity, the creation, enjoys the mercy of Allah, because there are those out there who are ensuring that things are being run according to Allah's commands. And of course, Allah's commands are the epitome of mercy, the epitome of stability, the epitome of a high quality of life. And what this really requires, we might not be able to be khulafa in terms of the political, sense, but what it means for me as an individual is that I have a responsibility to go out there in the world, whether that's public society, broader society, or my own Muslim community, or my own family, and to carry out the tasks and the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means I must learn what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants of humanity. I must learn the halal and the haram. And so what do you notice about how Allah talks about the people who learn, the people who have knowledge? يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah raises the ranks of those who believe and live according to their beliefs. But He even raises those who have knowledge a bit higher, even more higher, because they're the ones who go out and introduce humanity to the commands of Allah, call humanity to the commands of Allah. And what this requires is getting out of the individualistic lifestyle of isolation. All I care about is my career and my family, and that's it. I have no contribution to anything beyond that. Let's be honest here. Most Muslims in America live exactly this way. Most Americans live exactly this way. Their lifestyle is home to work, work to home, and then on days off, they'll go out as a family or maybe as an individual with some friends. And essentially what happens here is you have the isolationist lifestyle that restricts or prevents the individual from living, fulfilling their legacy as a Khalifa. We gotta break that. That's not how we're meant to be. And look at what the Prophet ﷺ says. ﷺ, he says, مَنْ خَالَطَ النَّاسِ وَصَبَرَ عَلَى أَذَاهُمْ خَيْرٌ مِمَّنْ لَمْ يُخَالِطِ النَّاسِ وَلَمْ يَصْبِرْ عَلَىٰ أَذَاهُمْ. You see, I understand why people want to live an individualistic lifestyle. If you ever lived in a society that's more socially intertwined, there are a lot of problems. You have the envy between family members, between cousins. You have the problems that they make for each other. You have the bad blood. You have all of that. And those living there are just wishing they can isolate themselves. But here, we did exactly that. And you find that people live this isolationist lifestyle, and now we're longing for social intertwining. We're longing for feeling like we have a family, missing the days where you go and you visit relatives, you visit your cousin, you just have fun as a large family. We're missing those days. The Prophet ﷺ says the following, in the hadith that I just quoted: the one who mixes with others and is patient with their problem making is better than the one who doesn't mix with people and therefore doesn't need to be patient with their problem making. And now we go back to the very first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Remember, Allah says 3 elements of humanity. They are on earth, they are khulafa, and Allah is developing them to be that. The human being is essentially a legacy of developing. From the moment they are born, they are developing from infancy to being a toddler, to being a kid, to being a youth, to being a young adult, to being an adult, to being a well-established adult, a role model, a leader, to being a senior and an advisor for the younger generations. The Islamic experience of the individual is a constant state of development. And personally, as I've been kind of talking about the pitfalls of individuality as per the Western experience, there is something that's really being revived in the Western world that I'm very excited about. The focus on self-development, the focus on really this idea of how do I be my best self? And of course, Islam and the Western world will overlap in some aspects, but they're going to be different in other aspects. But what I want us to take away is that as an individual, you will never reach the point where you are set. And look at the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, the best of the best. Day one of when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala received revelation, in comparison to the day the Prophet ﷺ died, compare them. Compare the companions from day one to the companions in the last day of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Have they grown? Have they developed? The answer is yes. But how did they develop? Was it simply reading the books of Islam? Well, they didn't have books of Islam. They had the Quran and the statements of the Prophet, which is, of course, more than sufficient. But the idea is they didn't have these sophistic institutions, these sophistic curriculums of learning Islam. How did they develop so well? And the answer is because Allah put them through a series of life events that developed them to being the leaders that they became. So part of the individual experience is submitting yourself to Allah's qada and qadar. He is saying, Inni ja'ilun. He is the one who's going to develop the human being. So let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring to you what He knows is the best way to develop you so that you become the best version of yourself. And so, in light of this, any and all circumstances and situations, no matter how sweet or how bitter they might be, all of them are engineered by Allah, sent to you, so that you can become the best version of yourself. Now it's just a matter of what will you choose? Will you embrace it and make the best of it, looking at the prophetic guidance and the Quranic guidance and how to make the best of it? Or will you go the opposite path of rejecting it, complaining about it, and making the worst of it? Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair for watching. Please share this khair and let other people benefit from the lessons, and support this masjid by becoming one of its sustainers.